Hi everybody, I'm Dennis. Welcome back to my marbling studio. You're joining me in the middle of a marbling session to make some custom end papers for my DUNE rebinding project, so I'm going to explain what it is that I'm doing while I work on this next print. I guess it would make sense for me to talk a little bit about what paper marbling is. It's a centuries-old art form that originated in Turkey and really hit its heyday in the 19th century bookbinding trade. The secret ingredient in paper marbling is the fluid in my tray here, which is sometimes called size. It's not simply water, but a thickened fluid called Carrageenan, which is derived from Carrageen moss, so it's a natural product. Where I live, it's available online in powder form, and I mix it with water to achieve a consistency that's sometimes described as being like whole milk. Basically, thick, but still very fluid. The interesting thing about the Carrageenan size that makes it so perfect for paper marbling is that it won't mix with paint, and moreover, the paints applied to it won't mix with each other. As you can see, as I let drops of paint fall on the surface of the bath, they float on top, and surface tension causes them to spread out. There are some other substances that can be used to make a marbling bath, methyl cellulose for example, though I get the best results with the Carrageenan. Of course, in order for the magic to happen, the paint needs to be specially prepared as well. It needs to be fairly thin, otherwise it'll sink to the bottom of the tray. And in order for it to spread out, it needs to have something called a surfactant added to it. Traditionally, a substance called oxgall was used for this, but I prefer to use a wetting agent used in photo processing. A few drops added to the paint is usually enough to achieve the desired effect, though just how much depends on when in the process I'll be adding the color. No matter how many colors I add to the bath, they won't mix, but they will squeeze each other to find equilibrium on the surface of the fluid. The earlier colors become more saturated as I add others, and later colors need more surfactant in order to muscle their way around the earlier ones. There are many ways of getting the paint onto the marbling fluid. Brushes made of horsehair and rose stems are very traditional, as are straw whisks. But most modern marblers in the West use things like fan brushes, or as I'm doing here, pipette droppers. With brushes, the paint is splattered onto the surface, creating random organic patterns that are a hallmark of traditional marbling. I'm going for a more controlled pattern though, so these little droppers are perfect. Once I've applied all the colors that I want and they've all spread out nicely, I can begin the process of combing the pattern. It's called this because the tool I'm using resembles a comb, but it's really just a piece of wood with some nails in it. I draw it through the bath to manipulate the paint, first in one direction and then the other. This has the effect of drawing the blobs of paint into long straight lines. There are lots of varieties of marbling combs, but a simple one like this can create a wide variety of patterns. Once I've drawn the paint out to make very fine lines, I switch to a long corsage pin, drawing it through the bath in a somewhat random wavy pattern. The lines of paint get stretched out, making them finer and finer, creating the impression of rolling sand dunes, which is exactly what I'd hoped for. Interestingly, the paint is still not mixing, despite being manipulated so much. The lines just get finer and finer, though sometimes the paint will break apart into little blobs, or the lines will get so tiny and tight that the colors appear muddy to the naked eye. Now that I've finished making the pattern, it's time to take a print. Laying the paper on the fluid takes care and skill, and a little bit of luck. It has to be done with a single gentle motion, as any shaking or hesitation will make ripples in the bath, which will appear as pale lines in the print. The paper I'm using has been treated with a solution of alum, which is a mordant that will bond with the paint on contact. Without the alum, the paint wouldn't stick and would wash off the paper later. I'll set up my draining board, and then I lift the print off the surface of the bath. The board is slightly damp and the paper usually will stay right where I put it while the excess size drains off. It's expensive stuff after all, so I don't want to waste it, and it makes for a remarkably slippery mess when you get it all over the floor. After it's drained for a while, I move the entire board over to my sink, where I gently rinse the print with plain water. After that, the paper just needs to be dried. My draining board has a couple of cutouts that allow me to attach my homemade clothespin hanger thingy. The paper is pretty delicate when it's wet like this, so I carefully lift it off the board and take it over to my drying rack, where you can see some of the other prints that I've made this session. Those will now air dry overnight, at which time I'll usually put them under a pressing board with some weight on them to flatten out. Then they get stored in my flat file cabinet to wait for the right bookbinding project. As you saw in the introduction, this particular print is for my rebinding of DUNE, and I'm really pleased with how it turned out. I think the fine wavy lines really evoke the vast deserts of Arrakis, with its rich veins of cinnamon-colored spice and traces of blue that hint at the precious hidden waters. I hope you've enjoyed this brief look at paper marbling. If you have, please give the video a like, and if you want to see more marbling content on the channel, let me know down in the comments. If you want to know more about some of the materials I used in this video, I'll put some information in the video description. And while you're there, you might also see a link on how to buy me a coffee. It's the easiest way to help support the channel directly if you're inclined to do so. Cheers! So as always, I'm Dennis, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.